Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start tonight's meeting, I'd like to talk about our process. The meeting is being conducted in person as well as by phone and Zoom. This allows Planning Commission members and or members of the public to participate in person or remotely. We will conduct a roll call to determine who is present throughout the meeting. We will call on individual planning commissioners to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard. We will conduct a similar process for comments from the public. Please wait until you are called on to offer comments and or testimony. If you'd like to speak, please submit a request in the chat function and wait to be recognized. I'd like to thank everyone for their understanding and patience. Minutes and audio recordings will be available on the Planning Commission website. I call this meeting of the Crook County Planning Commission to order. Today's date is November 12th, 2025. Time is 4:02. People joining me are your Crook County Planning Commissioners. We are volunteers that have been appointed by the Board of County Commissioners and make up a diverse cross-section of the community. The Planning Commission will consider the following agenda items. Public hearing for file 217-25-000-233-PLNG-01. Appeal of 217-25-000-233-PLNG. An administrative approval of non-farm dwelling. Next is a roll call for the Planning Commissioners. Kirk. Here. George. Here. Nikita. Here. Michael. No. Les is here. Hunter. Not online. Marlo.
Present.
Monty.
Present.
Frank.
Present.
Will staff indicate for the record which absences are excused or unexcused?
Both commissioners are excused.
Thank you. If there is anyone in the meeting room or participating remotely that wishes to address an item not on the agenda, is there anyone? If attending remotely, please enter a request to speak into the chat function. Hearing and seeing none, we will now mute all lines of those who are not staff or commissioners, and we'll move to the first item on the agenda. We will now move to the second item of the agenda, a public hearing, record 217-25-000-233-PLNG, the original, at 217-25-000-233-PLNG-01, the appeal. Central Oregon Land Watch submitted appeal of administrative approval of a non-farm dwelling submitted by Kilpatrick Consulting LLC on behalf of Duke and Dana Settle. The subject property is addressed at 2901 Southeast Myrtlewood Lane at map tax lot number 181-604-000-5300. The hearing is being held pursuant to Crook County Code CCC 18.172. The Planning Commission will be evaluating the request against the following applicable criteria: CCC Title 18, Chapter 16, the Crook County Comprehensive Plan, Oregon Administrative Rules, and Oregon Revised Statutes. Do any of the commissioner members have a conflict of interest or bias to disclose?
No, I do not.
No.
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 Has any member of the commission had an ex parte contact with the applicant or any member of the public regarding this matter?
No, I have not.
No.
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 Commissioners should disclose if they visited the site and state on the record and observation and impressions from the site. Kirk,
I looked at it online.
George,
No.
Lakita,
No.
Les, Mano, Monty,
No.
Frank? No. Marlo?
Google Earth.
Are the members of the public in person or participating remotely who wish to challenge any member of the commission? If participating online, please enter a request to speak using the chat feature. Have anyone online?
We do.
We do.
But no.
Hearing none, we'll move on. Before opening for testimony, either in person or for those participating remotely, want to remind everyone that all testimony must be directed to the applicable approval criteria and standards. No person may testify without first receiving recognition from the hearing authority and stating their full name and address. No person may present irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious testimony or evidence. Please do not repeat testimony. The commission may set time limits on oral testimony. Does any member of the commission wish to impose a time limit on testimony? Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence with enough detail to give the hearing authority and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with detailed specificity to allow the hearing authority to respond to the issue precludes the applicant from seeking action for damages in circuit court. At the conclusion of the hearing pursuant to CCC 18.172.081, Planning Commission may consider any request to continue the hearing or to leave the written record open. We will start the hearing with a staff presentation. After that, testimony from any federal, state, or local agencies will be allowed. We will then offer an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Individuals in support of the proposal will be heard, then those neutral to the proposal. Next, the appellant and any other individuals opposed to the proposal will be heard. The applicant can then offer rebuttal. We will now proceed with staff's presentation.
Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, Katie McDonald, Senior Planner for County. Have a quick presentation for you. Go ahead and go next. This is where we are in the process. We received the application in June, deemed it complete in July. Central Oregon Land Watch submitted initial comments July 15th. Applicant provided a response to those comments. Decision was issued August 15th. The appeal was submitted August 27th. The notice for the public hearing went out October 23rd. We're in the public hearing tonight with a 150-day clock of December 21st. So we are still within our timeliness. Applicable criteria that was reviewed is Crook County Code, Chapter 1816, exclusive farm use, Crook County Comprehensive Plan, Oregon Revised Statutes, and Oregon Administrative Rules. Here's a vicinity map. The light pink in the north is the city of Prineville urban growth boundary, following the Crooked River south to the kind of Prineville Reservoir, keep going south, and the lovely placement of the red arrow points out the Juniper Acres area, and this property is on the eastern side of that area. So just to give you a wider range of where this is located. The criteria 1816-040 in the decision is numbered as number 5. It is actually sub 7. All new non-farm dwellings on existing parcels within deer and elk winter ranges must meet the residential density limitations found in Wildlife Policy 2, the Crook County Comprehensive Plan. Compliance with the residential density limitations may be demonstrated by calculating a 1 mile radius for 2,000 acre study area. An applicant may use a different study area, size, or shape to demonstrate compliance with Wildlife Policy 2, provided the methodology and size of the study area are explained and are found to be consistent with the purpose of the Crook County Comprehensive Plan, Wildlife Policy 2. That is the issue that was raised on appeal. Wildlife Policy 2, next slide please. States density within crucial wintering areas for deer shall not be greater than 1 residence for each 160 acres, and for the general winter range, not more than 1 residence for 80 acres, except in the EFU 3 zone, in which 40 acres may be allowed per residence. This is ordinance number 71 from 1992. The applicant and appellant will both further address these. Next, the planning commission will need to decide if the applicant has met their burden of proof to determine compliance with the criteria and standards for the proposal of a non-farm dwelling. That is the conclusion of staff's presentation. The appellant and applicant are both here tonight, and they will be providing more information. Both John and I will be available to answer any questions and provide what guidance we can.
Okay. Agency testimony.
Questions?
Yes.
In the, not a staff report, a staff memo, it states in the decision that the request is for an approval of a non-farm dwelling to replace the manufactured home.
So there is a manufactured dwelling on the property. It was not legally established. And they are, so that is not correct terminology. The proposal is for a non-farm dwelling to remove that manufactured dwelling and put the dwelling in there.
Okay. So
If
it's my understanding, reading through the application, that they were gonna convert the manufactured home to some sort of studio. That the manufactured dwelling would remain there.
As an accessory structure, potentially. I missed that, George. I'd have to go back and reread it.
Okay.
Potentially you can. So generally speaking, manufactured dwellings are allowed as accessory structures if they do not meet the definition of a dwelling.
Okay, and I'm curious because we're kind of getting into counting numbers, counting structures to make a decision here.
You're counting dwellings.
Okay, so is the manufactured home going to remain, and I guess I can ask the applicant.
That would be a great question for the applicant.
Any other questions? Now will we hear from any agency representative? Is there any agency representative participating remotely who would like to offer testimony?
Hi, this is Jessica Wilkes from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce myself and just say that I am online if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Anyone else from the agency? who wants to testify? Applicant testimony. Does the applicant wish to testify? Please be sure to state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, folks. Bear with me. I'm at the tail end of a cold, so I'll be a little froggy here tonight. But for the record, my name is Craig Kilpatrick. I live at 13790 Northwest O'Neill Highway. Here representing the Settles in this application. Let me give you just a little brief background because I think it's germane. This actually started out as a application for a replacement dwelling. Years ago, a previous owner, not the current owners, but a previous owner, placed the existing manufactured home on the property without any permits. Obviously, that's not allowed, and particularly as a dwelling function. At the time, Pam Roden, our beloved staff member, was asked if the county would consider an application for replacement dwelling, and she wrote a letter that's in the record that said, yes, we would consider that, provided that it met all the criteria. We believed it did meet all the criteria, and we put forward an application that reflected the request for replacement dwelling. Staff, doing their job and doing it well, did a little bit of research, and I think using Google Maps, went back and determined that while it was a 1963 manufactured home, it had not been 1963 when it was placed, and so it was placed without permits. That said, we were asked to come in and shift gears a little bit because the county can only approve a replacement dwelling if it was lawfully placed and meet all the other criteria. So obviously, we no longer met the criteria. So we came in then with an application for a non-farm dwelling, which is what you have before you. The manufactured home that's out there, it's a single wide. One of the previous owners had gone in and built a wooden deck and some nice kind of wood walls, made it a little nicer than kind of the blister that it is. And the current owners are thinking, well, what we ought to do is decommission that, take out the stove, take out those elements that the county considers to make a dwelling, and we can use it for a studio. So that's the plan. Now, on the site plan that we submitted with the application, it clearly indicates the presence of that existing manufactured home. So we're not pulling any punches here. It's there. We acknowledge it's there. The county knows it's there. And so our application is one where we end up having a net zero change because we already have a dwelling in place. We're going to repurpose its use, and we're going to put a new dwelling on the same property. So in terms of the number concerns that one may have about this, there's no net change upward. So where we stand now, obviously, is the county went ahead, approved the application. They had no reason that they would think that they wouldn't, and it's under appeal. Now, that's the background on the property. I have the good fortune of kind of reintroducing my good friend and colleague, Heidi Bauer, who used to be a senior planner with Crook County. She was also a legal counsel for the planning department, and at one point in time, the assistant planning director before she moved on to other places. But Heidi's back with us tonight. I think, Lakita, you're probably the only one that's been here long enough to remember her and the excellent work that she does. And so I've asked her to kind of take over the legal end of this because that's obviously outside of my known skills. So with that, I'll introduce Heidi and let her take you through the minutia of why we think this application should be approved.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, what we have left of it, I guess, till evening. My name is Heidi Bauer. I live at 56162 Sandpiper Road in Bend, Oregon. It's actually down by Sun River. And I'm pleased to be back here. Last time I was here, I did not wear reading glasses, but now I do. We was recently moved back to the area, which is why I was able to call me and ask if I could weigh in on this application. I will reserve some of my comments until rebuttal, but just wanted to give a quick rundown of what we kind of see the issue. The Central Area Land Watch is challenging the compliance with wildlife policy 2 for this application. And for the purposes of this application, it's instituted through the code. The code refers to the wildlife policy and the density requirements, which are arguably 1 to 80 acres for general deer winter range. The code allows the county to accept a study area of 1 mile, or the applicant can propose a different study area as long as they explain it. And in the initial application, that's what was done. The county evaluated and accepted the applicant's study area, which was a 1 mile area that then excluded a subdivision called Juniper Acres, which is zone EFUJA. The reason that was excluded is because it's a pre-Senate Bill 100, which is the bill that established Oregon's land use planning system, basically. And it is a developed area with houses, and it is essentially a subdivision. One of the reasons it wasn't rezoned to rural residential or something like that is because, which would be an exception area under the law, is that it existed before goal 3, which is the agricultural goal, existed. So there was no need when the county went to zone it EFUJA to make it an exception area. So it's kind of a very strange thing. It's probably not one of those things that is existing in many counties. I don't know of another one that has something like this off the top of my head, but in the end, wildlife policy 2 is a county policy, and it allows the study area, and it allows you as the planning commission to interpret what that study area can be and why. Unlike the criteria for a non-farm dwelling, which is in the state law and establishes this 1 mile study area and all these different requirements, the county basically took that and stole it for the wildlife policy. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. However, other counties do it differently, and we're not asking you to do it any differently. We're just saying you have the discretion to decide if the applicant has justified that study area. And we have done that, not only in the initial application, but in subsequent materials which you received. The applicant has also provided 2 other study areas that actually do include Juniper Acres. That's not our preferred method for approval, because we believe that that could cause additional issues down the road for approving other non-farm dwellings in the area and other areas of the county. We think it would be better if the county decided that this was the standard interpretation for whether or not to include EFUJ or other Senate Bill 100 subdivisions, for example, like Versa Ranch. And that's really the premise, is just basically it's in the code and you have the discretion. And as long as there's adequate findings that are made, if you are inclined to approve this application, which we hope you will, you are allowed to do that under Oregon land use law. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them, or I can, come back with rebuttal later on.
Any questions? At this point? For the applicant or Heidi?
Could you give a little more explanation about how Juniper Acres was developed, but goal 3 didn't exist then?
Sure, it was, I don't have the exact year. It was basically platted in the 1960s. And Senate Bill 100 came along in the 70s, that's when goal 3 came into effect. And so it existed before goal 3. And that's why the county didn't have to take an exception to it when they established the FUJA zone. Could they have done that? Sure, they could have gone through the process if they wanted to. They didn't need to, and I wasn't here back then, so I can't tell you exactly why they made that decision, but that's essentially it. It's the same reason you don't see Riverside Ranch, for example, as like an R20 or something like that. They didn't feel the need to go take an exception area because it pre-existed.
So Can I ask another question? So when was the wildlife plan? Whatever we're calling it, adopted?
I believe it was the
Policy,
1980s.
policy two, thank you.
I believe it was 1980s. I don't know. Yeah, but I do believe it was the 80s.
John Eisler for the record, Development Director. I think Wildlife Policy 2 was enacted via Ordinance 71 in 1992.
92.
Thank you, John. Any other question? Thank you, Ike.
You.
Is there anyone here in person who would like to testify in favor? Is there anyone participating remotely who would like to testify in favor? Please enter a request using the chat feature. None? Is there anyone here in person who would like to testify neutrally? Is there anyone participating remotely who would like to testify neutrally? So please enter a request using the chat feature. Does the appellant wish to testify? Please be sure to state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Robin Hayakawa. On behalf of Central Oregon Land Watch Associate Staff Attorney. Our address is 2843 Northwest Lolo Drive, Suite 200, Bend, Oregon 97703. I'd just like to start by thanking the Planning Commission for hearing our appeal today. This is the first time I've actually appeared in front of the Planning Commission. And as a land use enthusiast myself, I always just like to express appreciation for your time and effort that you donate to our community here in Central Oregon. Landwatch's focus with this appeal, you just heard it from staff as well as the applicant, is on ensuring that this application demonstrates compliance with Crook County Code, that's 1816040 sub 7, as well as Wildlife Policy 2 and the Crook County Comprehensive Plan. These together limit residential density in the general deer winter range to no more than 1 residence per 80 acres. That's the technical legal reason behind our appeal. But in essence, we're here to make sure that this application and this applicant gives the consideration to big game habitat that Crook County requires. As you've seen by now, the issue at the heart of our appeal has to do with the applicant's exclusion of EFU juniper acres from their previous density development equations. Specifically, before this morning, they had submitted multiple iterations of a dwelling density study, which excluded over 1,900 acres. That's about a square mile right there. Land zoned EFU JA, EFU juniper acres. They reasoned, I think as you just heard from the applicant's attorney, Ms. Bauer, that because EFU juniper acres was platted pre-land use and already developed, committed to some form of development, that it didn't need to be considered when calculating density in the area. County staff ended up agreeing with that and pointed towards the program to achieve the goal in the Crook County Comprehensive Plan, which implemented Wildlife Policy 2 in 1992 and stated that specific zones, Wildlife Policy 2 would be applicable to specific resource zones. So EFU1, EFU2, EFU3, F1. I do think it's useful to just sort of discuss a little timeline here. You heard from the applicant that Juniper Acres was platted in the 1960s. That's true. It's a pre-land use subdivision. The land use, statewide land use planning was developed in 1973. Wildlife Policy 2 was developed in 1992. But I think really importantly, that EFU Juniper Acres zone was not established until the early 2000s. I think it was 2001 or 2003 via ordinance. And then I think equally importantly, there's an ordinance in 2010. One second. I don't actually have the ordinance number in front of me at the moment, but the ordinance in 2010 adopted a series of provisions into existing resource zones, including EFUJA. So, and these are what we just saw, 1816040 sub 7. And they state that there needs to be a 1 mile, 2,000 acre radius study, and that density needs to be computed in these zones in order to comply with Wildlife Policy 2. And importantly, at 18112.051, that's implemented into EFUJA. And this is titled Wildlife Policy Applicability, stating that it is applicable in EFUJA. Obviously, it's also applicable in EFU1. So I just bring this up to say that arguments like what was relied upon by the staff that the wildlife policy is not applicable to EFUJA is basically directly contradicted by what exists in Crook County Code, which really clearly shows an intent of the Crook County Board of Commissioners. I think it would have been the Crook County Court at that time, to make Wildlife Policy 2 applicable to the EFUJA zone. Now, with that said, it's a little unclear to Landwatch as the appellant now which wildlife study, which density study the applicant is relying on anymore. This morning, as they just noted, they submitted 2 other density studies. I have begun to review those and sort of analyze the methodology there. And frankly, I'm happy to see that the applicant is acknowledging that our concerns are legitimate by providing these updated wildlife or these density studies that do include EFUJA in their calculations. But at this time, while we still do oppose this application, without being able to further review and analyze the 36 pages that were submitted this morning, I think the appellant will rest for the time being. And we do request that the record remain open for 14 days after this hearing. And I welcome any questions you might have as well.
Any questions?
I got a question. Robin, and this is also for the fishing game. How can you guys expect us to take it serious? And you didn't say nothing about 300 acres of solar panels, but you're worried about 10 acres of someone else. And so to me, it's kind of like, what's the difference between solar and one person at a house?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I appreciate you too. I'm not trying to bust you
No,
down.
of course not. I think it's a valid
I'm just kind
question.
of confused about why nothing was said on that, but yet somebody wanting to build a home out in Squatterville is.
Yep, absolutely. I just drove into Prineville for the first time in, I think since last spring, and I saw a lot of the ground that had been cleared up on the grade. It's very visible. So I guess the first thing I'd say is I'm not exactly sure which solar farm you're talking about, because there's several in the area.
But all in the same corridor that we're talking about?
The most recent one, which I think is just being called Moffett Road Solar, Landwatch did comment on that. And our comments were not outright opposed. I think that we believe in energy transition and struggle to weigh those sort of considerations with other things we appreciate, like wildlife habitat and farmland preservation. But we did comment on that application, advocating for the applicants, the solar developers, to adopt the proposed wildlife mitigation plan by ODFW. Which they ultimately did, which involved a deal with Crook County Soil, Water and Conservation District. As for why this 10 acres is important, I think there's some sort of intuitive reasons. We can all agree that rural development in wildlife habitat is harmful, but it's also provided by the Crook County Comprehensive Plan as of 1992, which stated that rural residential development is the biggest threat to big game habitat in Crook County. I submitted comments, I believe yesterday morning, that sort of got right to that point. I tried to keep those to the point that, this is what in 1992, Crook County determined was the best way to limit environmental, economic, social, and energy consequences of allowing some degree of development in big game habitat. And if you don't mind, Commissioner.
No, I
have one
just
other
wondering
thought.
how you can
Yeah.
say that when you're talking about a corridor that the animals have went through for the last 100 years, ever since I'm 50 years old, ever since
Sure.
I remember going through there, and you totally, that's gonna be shut down. Okay, so is that gonna affect the corridor all over of Central Oregon?
Your
Sorry,
reference.
coming in from online, this is Jessica Wilkes from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. In regards to your question about solar development, I was not personally the contact for those projects, so I can't speak to the details of those applications, but I do want to say that solar development is something that we are concerned about and are very interested in working with continued solar development in the county, and it is a concern. It is a source of habitat loss, and with the fencing around solar panels, it is a major disruption to migratory corridors. So there are definitely concerns there, just for the record.
Thank you.
For the record, John Lask, Development Director, I'm not getting my skis here, but with those solar applications that we've had over the years since 2018, the two main commenters have been ODFW and Central Oregon Land Watch, to their credit.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. One other thing, Commissioner Giovannini, I would also argue that Wildlife Density Policy 2 asks the county to look at cumulative impacts of residential development. So it's not just this one property. It's far from personal with Mr. and Mrs. Settle. But what's going on is, if you look at this map, they are attempting to develop a dwelling kind of in the Crook, the eastern Crook of an area surrounded on three sides by juniper acres, which I don't have a long track record of familiarity with Crook County, admittedly, but from what I understand is an area heavily impacted by unregulated or underregulated development, and that affects wildlife. It certainly affects wildlife, and so in this case, for the applicant to argue that that area should just kind of be invisible, not considered whatsoever, it just doesn't really make intuitive sense, even beyond the law, that an area already heavily impacted by residential development would be excluded from consideration.
John, Lask, for the record again, I just want to remind planning commissioners we should keep our focus on the standards and criteria on the application in front of us as much as possible.
Katie, do you have a question?
Yes. So I was thinking about the information you were giving on the ordinance from 2010. and it says that wildlife policy 2 is applicable to both EFU 1 and EFU JA. And that it explicitly says that all new farm dwellings on existing parcels must meet the residential density limitations. So is that the 1 to 80 acres that's been talked about for residential density in that zone? Is that, am I misunderstanding?
No, I think you are understanding, Commissioner, thank you. The property is located in EFU 1. The applicant submitted several maps showing that it's on 3 sides. It's on the eastern edge of EFU JA. And so Landwatch, my argument, our argument is that land within EFU JA must be considered. It's
In
explicitly.
the count is what you're
Correct,
saying.
correct. It's explicitly made applicable by Crook County Code.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
That's not helpful.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here in person who would like to testify in opposition? Is there anyone participating remotely who would like to testify in opposition? Please enter a request using the chat feature. None? Would the applicant like to offer any rebuttal testimony?
In. I just wanted to address a few points that were made, and I think they're important to consider. The first note was which study area is the applicant trying to use, and the applicant is attempting to use the first study area. However, we have supplied 2 other wildlife area studies that include Juniper Acres. And the reason we've done this is that in hopes that you will approve the application, you can approve it under any 3 of those. What we would suggest is that you approve it under the first one and make alternative findings under the second 2. This is common for appeals that might eventually go to LUBA in order to be able to sustain if the county decides to approve it, to sustain the decision. So that's why we provided the other 2. We did that without prejudice because we want to make sure this application is able to be approved under whatever criteria, whatever interpretation you ultimately decide on. We didn't want to presuppose that you were going to go with our interpretation. So we've provided 2 other ones that go with including Juniper Acres. I also just wanted to point out that Juniper Acres, we're not saying that the wildlife policy has not been applied to Juniper Acres. This application is in EFU 1. EFU JA already arguably had the wildlife policy applied to it when they adopted the requirements for 150 dwellings. And since then, there's been a moratorium. There's no more permits for dwellings to be issued there. So my understanding is there can no longer be any more dwellings there. I think there were some amendments done that you can still do accessory dwellings and things like that, but no more actual dwellings. And if you look at what we submitted, you'll see that the actual density ratio that is in Juniper Acres, which was found to be compliant with wildlife policy 2, is actually 1 to 40. And so what we're saying is if you apply in EFU 1 and you're adjacent, it's not next to Juniper Acres, but it's near, is that it's not basically fair to include in a 1 mile study area a subdivision that is 1 to 40. Because what it does is it skews it for any applicant right outside the area is going to have to include that subdivision. And that's not what you historically do. If you have rural residential areas, for example, you usually don't include those because they're committed exception areas. Here, EFUJ is not an exception area. We're not saying it is, but we are saying it existed prior to Goal 3, and therefore it's just not reasonable to include an area of 1 to 40 in a 1 to 80 acre ratio. Any applicant that applies outside that area is going to have the same problem, and it's a problem that has existed for some time, frankly. And it was, the county did what it did. Like I said, I wasn't here back when they did that. I don't know why they chose to do it exactly that way. But I don't think that it's reasonable to interpret it as including it for the simple fact that it's already been applied. So this would be reapplying it to a subdivision when it's already been considered. There was already an ESC analysis done under goal 5. It was acknowledged. So how is an applicant now supposed to address that? Are you just going to prohibit development from now on, no new farm dwellings within anywhere near 2 acres? Because they have to basically subsume 1 to 40. So in reality, what's applied to them is actually a different ratio. It's not really 1 to 40, it's not really 1 to 80, it's something in between that they end up having to meet because of that subdivision. So that is one of our reasons that we're saying we think an interpretation that this particular area should be excluded from the area study. And as I said, we're not arguing that it's not zoned EFU. We said it's EFU JA, it's a distinct area, it has its distinct findings that show it's a subdivision. What we're saying is for the purposes of wildlife policy 2, which was goal 5, natural resources, that the applicant and the county can consider what's actually there. And what's actually there is a subdivision, regardless of whether it's zoned EFU or not. It's just, it is a subdivision. And that's all I have. If you have any further questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any other questions for Heidi?
Yes, please. Okay, originally I was under the impression that the problem was that is a non-farm dwelling being placed in an EFU 1 zone. But now my understanding is that it's any dwelling placed in whatever zone that doesn't comply with wildlife plan 2. Have I missed the point? Because the size of the property having a dwelling on it is going to displace winter range deer. So what am I totally misunderstanding here?
I don't think you're misunderstanding. It's pretty complicated and it's confusing because of the situation that we're in. And this staff was not here back then either. They didn't make this up. So this is what is just historically been there. And this application is in EFU 1. It has this wildlife policy 2 addressed to it. That allows you to do a study area in order to determine the density.
Wait, question. It
Sure.
allows you to or causes you to?
Under the code section, which I don't have right in front of me, but it's basically says that you have to apply the density ratios
Okay.
in wildlife policy 2 to the criteria. And as part of that, to prove that, you do a study area. And what we're saying is the code does allow you to use a different study area rather than just a 1 mile circle. You might have reasons that you exclude things, you might have reasons you add things back in, but our argument is basically we have excluded that because it's a subdivision and it has already kind of had wildlife policy 2 applied to it. And they went with it's essentially a 1 to 40 ratio that they ended up with. And so then if you draw that into the circle, it skews the rest of it. So it's non-farm, it's a non-farm building in EFU 1, and then nearby is another area of EFU that has a lot of different parameters in it, including a subdivision.
So if this was situated, like, if this was EFU 1 somewhere that happened to be next to the urban growth boundary, you wouldn't count the.
You wouldn't count the urban growth boundary.
So basically it's the same thing because Juniper Acres has been, what do I call it, developed.
Yeah. And in the past, in other places, you, generally speaking, what happens is you exclude committed areas where they've taken an exception to goal 3 if it was actually agricultural land to begin with. And that's probably what some of the city is. It probably wasn't even agricultural land to begin with. I don't know the exact city zoning, but what we have here though is an EFUJA zone. So we're saying it is an EFU zone, but in reality, it's a subdivision and it still maintains an EFU designation. And we're not arguing that it doesn't have an EFU designation, it does. But what we're saying is under goal 5, which is like wildlife and stuff versus goal 3, which is agricultural, you have a study area in your code that allows you to basically manipulate the study area for good reason, and you have to explain those reasons. And we feel that there is good reason because there's a subdivision that's already sitting there. And basically this non-farm dwelling application is having to take account for that, something that was already there, that already pre-existed, that doesn't really, it doesn't really line up with 1 to 80 acres. And then you've got an EMQ area that's got basically kind of 1 to 40. And this applicant over here has to include that. Now, you can make legal findings to that effect, and there's a lot of things that can go into that, but essentially that's what it is. And as long as it's explained properly in findings, that can be upheld.
Yeah, and your contention is that it's not gonna add any new dwellings, it's going to, the number will stay the same. Because what's a dwelling now won't be a dwelling.
Yeah, it won't, there won't be a new dwelling, and even if you, I know what, one of the things in Central Land Watch's submissions, what they were saying, we didn't count that one. Even if you count it under the study area, it's still below the threshold, so we just feel like it's immaterial at that point, whether it's counted or not. Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. To the point, Commissioner, that you made about the non-farm part of this, excuse me. I just want to clarify a point. It's not really a point that's in dispute, pardon the voice, but these are non-farm parcels out there. If you look in the application, you will find that we were very careful to do a survey of the subject property and the properties around it. They're all class 7 soils. Class 7 soils are determined to be generally unsuitable. This is not a farm. We're not taking a farm and dividing non-farm parcels like we do in other applications. It's already a non-farm parcel. And we're asking to go through the proper process to put a non-farm dwelling on it. And that's it, in the essence, as far as that's concerned. The property's not under farm deferral or any of the other things that would happen. Of course, there's no water out there, so it makes it a little rough too. But that's an undisputed fact in terms of the appeal, that it's a non-farm parcel. And the information that we put in the application proves that.
Thank you.
And any other questions, and I'll let you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The staff have any other comments? John?
I think since there were a few late submissions to the record with some pretty important arguments, I think that we could all benefit with some more time with the applicant and the appellant, having a chance to digest those and then rebut what was presented. There's no question that Juniper Acres has been a difficult area for planning purposes for quite a long time. You know, my personal opinion, it is still EFU right now. It's designated EFU. They went through this process in 2001 with ordinance. I don't know if this is in the record anywhere, but ordinance number 18, amendment 53, where they tried to address Juniper Acres as best they could. It's where they put the cap on the number of dwellings. As the applicant stated, that was kind of a broad application of the wildlife policy density standards to that whole neighborhood. I think at the time that was, I don't know why they did that instead of the exception process. This is not great farm ground, so goal 3, it still applies, but it's kind of one of the situations where it seems like the county's kind of tried to do the best they could to fit within the statewide land use planning rules with this area, and this is kind of one of the outcomes of it. Obviously, goal 5 is still important in that area. That hasn't changed. But this is a weird situation with an application that has pretty simple facts. And so, like I said, I think we're gonna give the parties a chance to look back at what's been submitted and respond. And then I think I can give more specific responses and answers to you guys after we get that further information. But I am here for any questions you have.
I have a question.
Go for it, Monty.
So, has the land and the structure been taxed?
I believe so, yeah, for quite a while.
And this is just because I don't know any different, right? So once a municipality or the county or whoever accepts tax payment on something, doesn't that kind of sidestep the whole approval process? Nobody went out and said, hey, you gotta take that off.
I need to be careful how I answer that question.
Well, I mean, I'm asking it because it kind of, it's like, it tickles something in the back of my mind going, okay, somebody screwed up, this never got fought, this was a compliance issue to begin with, however long ago it was, right? And so, once it's been accepted, and I'm not saying for or against, I'm just saying that kind of question comes into mind of whether it is basically been permitted at this point. Does it have a well? Does it have a septic? Does it have other things that support it? It has power out there. I mean, all these other things have been permitted, or I assume they've been permitted. So it kind of sidestepped some of this stuff whenever it was put on the property.
I think I feel comfortable saying this is one of those left-hand, right-hand situations.
Okay.
The evidence of submitting taxes for property taxes for a dwelling can be relevant to things like let's see where right now. Obviously, replacement of a dwelling that shows that it's been a dwelling, been paying taxes on it. It's relevant for things in common law, like why is the word escaping me? Squatters to have rights when the right to the property showing they had a good faith interest in the property, they've been paying their taxes. It does not show land use approval, which is still a requirement, and that's what started this whole process. Is the applicant trying to do the right thing? I'm trying to get a replacement dwelling.
Gotcha.
But it can't be a replacement dwelling because it originally placed illegally, and so that's why they're in the situation.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be when I was younger okay, they didn't want people out in Juniper Acres, and like the road, they didn't fix it, and I remember when I was younger, the county didn't even go out there. And so it's kind of like that place was kind of where you went and everybody left you alone. Is that right? Still how it is? Or or are they allowing county people to go in there now and do stuff, or?
That's beyond the scope of this application. But yeah, so as it was stated on the record, it was platted in the 60s before land use. It was originally platted and sold to servicemen as a place to go camp. I have not been here for the history of it since then, but currently as it stands, it seems like there is a split of residents there that really want to get services, to get the roads fixed, to become a proper community against other citizens that prefer to be left alone.
Yeah, I'm sorry to put it on the record. I'm just a longtime resident and I wanted it to be on the record because we're discussing
Yeah.
it as a neighbor, you know?
It's something that has been on the back burner for county planning purposes. It's been a hard nut to crack. But I think this is just an example of that, how to deal with the wildlife policy. This is one aspect of many things that are very hard to fix with a community that was developed. And then land use came in and said, no, we want to have all this stuff be farm ground. And how do you deal with what's already there, right? And it seems like the exception process did not work for that, and we did the best we could back in 2000. Now here we are.
So with regards to that, at what point do you say enough is enough? And you just stick with kind of hard and fast, like there's always gonna be gray areas, right? So we're kind of in a gray area because it's next to what could have been at some point, or R5 or R10 or whatever development, which I think if that designation, it would really change the whole equation, wouldn't it? If it wasn't JA, if it was RR10 or RR whatever.
I think we need to stay on task with our,
We do. That does bring up, I think, one of the arguments though, is that that's why the wording is the way it is in the code. Let me try to pull it up.
I guess what I was trying to say, not to be off topic, but if you were next to a city, if you were next to a rural residential area or a residential area, you're excluding that area, but the property's not designated as that, so it's still EFU JA. Which doesn't necessarily mean anything to me, but I
So
don't know.
I think that the argument we've made there, that's why they allow in our code a different study area or size than just a standard circle, for situations where there are, where a standard circle doesn't work, whether it's next to UGB or something like that, where, they just need to show compliance with the comprehensive plan, with wildlife policy, that we aren't trying to maintain this residential density generally. But sometimes, you need to show it a different way than just a standard circle.
Okay.
okay? At this point, has there been an ask to continue the hearing or request that the record be left open? There has. The commission will now determine if the hearing should be closed or continued to a time and date certain, either for additional testimony, additional information from staff, or for deliberation only. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mainly because of new information that's come in, we haven't had time to review it. I move that we close the hearing, but keep the record open, written record open for 777.
Second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Kurt,
I'm staying.
Monty,
Yes.
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
motion carried.
Can we clarify on the record, please, the dates for the 777, if you look on your
Right.
script?
Can you do that? For the record.
So. The 777 submission of additional written testimony is due by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. Rebuttal to the new evidence is due by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, November 26th, 2025. The applicant's final argument is due by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, December 3rd.
Thank you.
Do we want to mention the time and date certain for the continued hearing?
we gonna hear?
I don't know if we have a quorum as that is. So one of the potentials is right now we only have one meeting scheduled in December for December 10th. The dates for this and allowing staff to pull anything together, that makes it very tight. It would not come before the planning commission 7 days in advance. Therefore, a potential special meeting being called for December 17th based on if we can get a quorum. So we would need to look at a date and time certain would be potentially December 10th as our regularly scheduled meeting. However, that would allow just that information or December 17th.
I'm
Or a
in
special
arbitration that week. 17th, 18th, 19th.
I'm good with the 17th. But what's the point, or what's preventing us from doing the 10th?
time for staff to get it back to us.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay,
Because they're gonna submit final
okay,
argument on it wouldn't, on the third, which would be the day that staff would need to get anything to you 7 days in advance.
I can do the 17th.
I can do 17.
I can't do the 10th, but I can do the 17th.
Okay, so it sounds like the 17th, so if you wanna also include in that a date and time certain, 4 PM, December 17th here.
I would amend my motion that we close the hearing, keep the written record open for 777. And we continue, well, we've closed the hearing, I can't continue a closed hearing.
For deliberations only.
Okay, that we have a hearing on December 17th at 4 PM for deliberations only.
Second that.
All in favor, right?
Yes.
Rakita?
Yes.
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 Aye. Yeah.
Aye.
Okay. Community development updates.
So this was really just an opportunity to remind everyone that we have, meeting on December 10th, and now December 17th.
Yes, for my part of the update, it's good we may have another hearing now that we can set on the 17th. That was originally looking at the 10th, but the 17th is gonna work better. Also on December 10th, I am going to be, myself and some other members of staff, we're gonna be presenting what's called County College that night. I think starting at 6, and so, in our best interest, we already have a lot on December 10th to go over. We have a big code update, and so I'm gonna have to scoot out of here early, and so it's good not to have too much on that date. This Friday, I'm presenting on our department's core services. All the departments are doing that. We'll see how that goes. I think that's the first time we've had to do that. But I think those are our main updates. We just saw you guys a couple weeks ago, and otherwise we're just chugging along. We have not heard back yet on that Goal 5 technical assistance grant from DLCD, but hopefully we'll hear back sometime in December. As you can see, from hearing today, that is still very urgent for me to get taken care of.
Okay. Anything else? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Everybody's looking at me, George.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any question? Carried.